Welcome to the South Dakota Bandmasters Heritage Series. My name is Mary Cogswell, and it is my privilege to document the heritage of the South Dakota Bandmasters organization by interviewing directors that had a significant impact on band education in South Dakota. Today's guest is Milo Winter. Milo served as band director at Rapid City Stevens from 1969 until 1996. Under his direction, his bands earned numerous honors, including the prestigious Sudler Flag of Honor given by the John Philip Sousa Foundation for standards of excellence in concert activities. As director, Milo has been the recipient of many awards recognizing his service as an outstanding bandmaster and educator. In 2015, he was recognized at the South Dakota Governor's Award in Arts for outstanding service in arts education. You can kind of tell us how you got started in band and music once upon a time.
I think probably the first introduction to performing music was in church, like a lot of kids, and also my parents had a high value of music because they weren't allowed to do that when they were children. They didn't have that opportunity. So when I was in third grade, I took piano lessons from my cousin, which didn't make me happy at the time, but it stood me in good stead. I actually wound up playing for church. The other thing I remember of going downtown on Wednesday evenings, and when they would have the municipal band, city band at that time, in Alpena, South Dakota, would play, and I just marveled at all those odd collection of people from older to younger could get together and sound that well. That intrigued me very much. The magic of music. That's kind of planted the seed for band, I think.
Absolutely. And then so you started on trumpet?
I did in third grade.
Third grade.
Hans Christensen was my band director. Yeah. Hans was the father of Paul Christensen, who was my second band director. And then he was followed in turn by, when I was a junior in high school, Stuart Christensen. I had 3 generations of the Christensens as my band directors in school. I thought all band directors in South Dakota were named Christensen, because the only other one I knew about was Christie in South Dakota State.
That's great. I mean, that's great that you were able to follow that lineage, too, through that family.
I don't know how many people realize that Paul Christensen was in the Sousa Band at one time. Oh. The Sousa Band. So.
Yeah, the original. Wow, that's terrific. So that would be lots of lessons you could have learned from him.
Oh, very. I was really fortunate in the small school. That was in the days of the traveling itinerant music teachers, and band day was 2 days a week, and we looked forward to that. And usually it was a half a day, I think. Just in the morning, the band director would be there, then he'd head off down the road to another school in the afternoon.
Sure. That's great. So you had lots of influences from your high school band directors along the way, and then as you went into college, you went to Augie.
Correct.
And then I assume more influential directors and teachers there.
Guderian was the band director, Richard Guderian, and he was actually an orchestra guy, but did a nice job. I learned a lot about how to play orchestral arrangements for band from him.
Oh, that's terrific. So, if you could begin your college years over, is there something you would do differently?
I don't think so. Augustana was a small school at that time, and there were a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things. You played in everything and for everything, and I actually played in the Sioux Falls Orchestra at that time as a college student in the trumpet section, and that was a great experience for me, and also played in the municipal band in Sioux Falls, so that also was a big advantage.
So the Sioux Falls Symphony, was that the same as now what's the South Dakota?
Correct. It was
Symphony?
called the Town and Gowan Symphony there then, because it was partially Augustana students and partially local.
Gotcha. And I think they do something similar to that still, band-wise, with community and student-wise. So, speaking of music education, what advice would you give to students wanting to go into music education at this point?
John Painter was our band, all-state band director, and I hosted him a couple of times, so I got to know John Painter, the band director at Northwestern at the time. And he advised me and our students to go to a small school state school where you can play in almost all of the ensembles sometime along the line for experience. Then as a graduate student, come to Northwestern. He said an 18-year-old doesn't compete well from South Dakota with a Chicago-trained musician who's taken lessons for 10 years from Bud Herseth in the Chicago Symphony. But he said by the time they have had a wide range of experience, they have pretty well caught up, and those are the students we like to have at Northwestern in our graduate program. So that was, I thought that was good advice.
That's very good advice, because I think some students, they get really overwhelmed too if they go too big too fast.
Correct.
So that would be great advice for small town South Dakota students looking to go, and not just music, really.
I think it was.
So that's great. So what were your early teaching years like? So you went to Augustana, and then did you go right into teaching?
I did.
After that?
I taught my first year at Beresford, South Dakota, and learned more than the kids the first year, like everybody else. And interesting sidelight, I just hoped and prayed that Bill Ireland and Ardeen Foss would be in the coffee room at Williams Piano in Sioux Falls. I would hang around there during the morning, and if there was a lull in the conversation, I would ask some of my dumb questions about what do I do about this and that. And they were always very kind to the rookie band director and gave me really good advice. So that was probably worth about 10 graduate hours right there. But anyway, that was one of my remembrances of the first year.
And I think that's where the mentoring has come into play now, where we can get some of the new teachers out there with mentoring, our mentoring program. Again, I'm hooked up with somebody that can really help them.
Well, every situation is different. I just remember one anecdote. I was fortunate to be hired at Beresford because it was a town that was hungry for good music, because many years before I went there, they had a band director who was very classically oriented. For example, the band at the homecoming parade played the themes from Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov on a big hayrack that they pulled through the parade. That was their parade tune that year. One of my first days on the job, a seventh grader and eighth grade. We had seventh and eighth graders in the band at that time. That was the situation I inherited there. But they were about ready to get into fisticuffs right outside the band room door right after rehearsal, and I got in the middle and said, "What in the world are you guys fighting about?" And one said, "Well, he thinks that Bernstein and the New York Philharmonic have the best recording out of Dvorak's finale to the New World Symphony, and anybody knows that Ormandy and the Philadelphia is much better." And I thought, these guys are way ahead of me here. But that's what they were arguing about. And kids went to bed with classical music playing in the background in Beresford when I got there, because of that director that had been there, an Englishman, years before. And the parents, I was getting the kids from those parents that were in that band. Wow. Another example, the dentist that stayed was a son of the lady that ran the rooming house I stayed in. He was a full-fledged dentist at the time I knew him, but he had gone to school an extra year because he didn't have the director didn't have a real good first trumpet player to substitute if he graduated too soon. So he just hung around and went 5 years of high school so he could play in the band one more year.
Okay, you don't hear of that happening very much anymore.
Not really.
Probably wouldn't advise it either. That's great. But yeah, Beresford has been, they've had quite a tradition of directors there too. So you were there for 1 year.
No, then I was drafted in the Army, and then I came back and did 9 more years there. So I was there for 11 years actually.
Okay.
So. All
right, and then you came to Rapid City, and that's when Stevens opened. Is that correct?
No, I had the central band for a couple of years before that, and then before the school opened. And then I came out to Stevens.
And then you were there for the rest of the time.
Yeah, that was an interesting. My first assignment at Rapid City Central was to give you an idea of the program at that time. it was very popular with kids because the first thing I did was I interviewed or auditioned about 300 kids in about 4 or 5 days before school opened. I had to cut 50 because we didn't have room for any more. That we had 3 bands, and that was as many as we could have room for.
Wow.
So
that would be eye-opening, and I assume the school had to be a pretty good size at that time.
Yeah, well, it was huge. Yeah.
Right.
It was,
before they split.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that you'd want to do better than that, I would assume.
So right. So that was an interesting thing. So.
And then you were at Stevens when it opened.
Correct.
And then did you have any say in the planning of Stevens and the music area?
Somewhat, yeah. We kind of went along with the model that they had going at the time. Everybody was vertically staffed here, which I thought, and we kept, and I think it was a real good thing. I did an elementary school, or part of an elementary school, every year that I taught for 27 years in Rapid City. So to give you an example, so
right, and that's some of that's good until then you don't have time to do that either. You have a big enough band program that there isn't time for that.
Right, but I always enjoyed that hour of getting out of the high school and going down working with the little kids, and it kind of keeps your feet on the ground where they belong.
That is true, because that's all I do every day. So it definitely keeps you grounded as to what they can figure out what to do wrong next, those bad habits that form. So that's great. And then, I know over the years, the Stevens Band program was very successful, won lots of honors, and like we spoke about earlier, was given the Sudler Flag of Honor, which is given by the John Philip Sousa Foundation. And if you can kind of remember and tell us how that came about, because that's quite an honor. Not many bands in the United States actually have that honor bestowed on them.
I was encouraged to apply, and I think it did take 2 tries. I think they needed a march or something that I didn't send in on the first audition kind of thing, and so it was an application thing that someone invited me or encouraged me to do that. Okay. So we were pleasantly surprised too.
That's quite an honor, and I believe Stevens is the only band in South Dakota that has had that award given to them to date.
As I said, I'm not sure.
So what do you attribute to the success that you had at Stevens? How did you make that program become so successful?
Well, in the first place, I inherited a program that was really growing at the time. As I said, it was very competitive just to be in the band. I mean, you had to pass an audition, or you couldn't, which was sort of sad in a way too, because there's some kids that I'm sure that were on a 3-minute audition were robbed of their opportunity to be in music. So that was difficult. But when the schools split, of course, the numbers were a little smaller.
Sure.
But the community was very supportive and had been well trained, or the value system was such that band was a big deal. It's something that you wanted to be in. And that was something I inherited, and that was already here, which we were able to cash in on. That was probably the big thing, is the parental ideas of what the band should be and what they wanted to have. And so that was, and very honestly, the West River, East River thing in all-state band and marching band, the competitive competition was part of that too. People in Rapid City wanted bands that were as good as the Sioux Falls bands, just very frankly. And so we tried to do that.
All right, so the next question is, what do you feel is our biggest challenge right now in music education, and how do you see us moving forward in our career in education?
Probably scheduling and trying to get these kids and parents to realize that music enhances anything else kids do, including athletics, especially in the smaller schools and the larger ones too. It's something that every child can benefit from whether their initial interest or most interest is in athletics or in drama or whatever. Music it will help them excel in that, and it works vice versa also, I think. So as well as scholastically. So that's a tough sell when they come in and say, "Well, we can't do everything." Well, you can do everything if one helps the other. If you want to count playing with your cell phone as something that's doing something, then it won't. But scheduling is, I think, probably the most important thing for the success of your program. You have to see the kids a reasonable amount of time, and I think it has to be on a regular basis. I'm not a fan of block scheduling. I don't think it's good for kids outside of the music department, and it's certainly not good for them either. I just I don't think kids of the age of that we through high school respond well to. I think duration is not as important as frequency. Put it that way.
I agree. So what do you tell parents that say, "Oh, my son, daughter can't be in band because of"? What's your response to that? That's what I struggle with.
Again, I think they have to realize that being in band would help them succeed to a greater extent of whatever their first or their highest priority is. And of course, everybody would like band to be their highest, or music in general would be their highest priority. But a lot of students benefit the program and benefit themselves by even if it isn't their highest priority. And I think that's the only way. If you have some students in your band that can be examples of that, and probably there are some.
Sure. Fewer, it seems, every year.
It does. And part of that is athletics now demand. Soccer used to be a seasonal sport. And basketball and football, track were all seasonal sorts. Now they're not. They're not seasonal anymore. But I guess band isn't either. So
this is a true statement. So. And then I know you have started the Rapid City New Horizons Band. So how did that come into being?
I was in Canada. They have National Band Week, and I was asked to be a consultant on one of those weeks. They take all the lottery money for 1 week and give it to the school music programs. And so they had somebody come up, and so I flew into Saskatoon. They gave me a car and a schedule, as they say in Canada. And I would go to three places, three schools, some in little tiny towns out in the country, some in large cities, and visit with the band director and do whatever. And we just sort of talk to the people and offer whatever they wanted to ask and so forth. But anyway, one night I went to this school, and I heard one of the most god-awful loud beginners bands I've ever heard in my life. And I went and opened the door just a little bit and peeked in with great trepidation, and there was a sweet-looking grandmother valiantly trying to get a sound on a flute, and all this din going on. And she was not having good success, and she finally put it in her lap and mouthed a four-letter word that wasn't probably what she usually said. But I thought how great that was. And then about 30 minutes later, they all had coffee and donuts and so forth and so on, and went back to work. And so that was a beginner's band. It was not a New Horizon band. It was a beginner's band for adults before the New Horizon thing really had. Okay. And then at an ABA convention later, I saw Roy Ernst give a presentation with the first one that they ever had back in New York. And it showed how they started out and their first parade, not marching, but so forth and so on. So, and what fun it was. And that I thought I'd like to do that when I retire, so I did.
That's great. So the people in the New Horizons band have they played instruments before or not, or a combination?
Some have,
Okay.
some have not, and they have plenty of help if they haven't. We have a lot of people that have played, and a lot of former band teachers and music teachers and so forth. So
that's great.
And but right off the bat, they sit next to people who can play, and they learn really quick.
Sure,
it's amazing.
I would imagine that they do. That's great. We should have more of those. I'm going to do that when I retire.
It's really a lot of fun.
And then where do you perform?
Oh, just all kinds of places.
Okay.
A lot of times in nursing homes, if they have a large place,
right.
But we do a lot of other things. We play at the senior center. A couple of years. That's part of our rent that we pay for paying there, and down at the downtown museums and so forth when they have special events. And a lot of civic things that they do. And once in a while we have conventions come to town, like a veterans convention of the cruiser from World War II or Korean War had their convention here. And I have a big band off that too, a dance band. And so one of those two bands fits into those things. One of the most fun things we do is play in parochial schools that have a very small band program. But those kids don't really ever hear a pep band, a marching band, or whatever, because they don't go to public school events very often. So they're sort of left out of hearing a band, and they really enjoy the band. And I think it's good. And a lot of them now are starting to play and take lessons. So if they go to a public school as high school people, they have
that's great.
They could play in the band. So. We think that's a lot of fun, and the reaction of the kids to us old folks playing fun music is really quite good. And the band is really a pretty good band. We have some really good players in it now.
But that's really great for the younger kids to see. This is something that you can do when you are older.
Yeah.
Where some activities that's not the case.
Yeah, that's part of my shtick when we. I sometimes ask the band to say, everybody, all the soccer players in here, raise your hand. And I said, if you ever played soccer, then lots of arms go up, or football, or basketball, or track. And how many of you play now? And usually there aren't very many bands, but here we are having a good time playing music.
Yep. And that's what I think. I know the community band in Brookings. There isn't a New Horizons band, but I know there are middle school kids all the way up to people in their 70s and 80s, and I think that's great for the community and the students to see that. That starts young, and you can keep doing this really forever as long as you can keep a beat and
sure.
have enough air support to blow into the instrument.
It's a little different if you direct one. Some people can't hear very well, and so you seat the band differently because the people with poor hearing have to go in the front, and also everybody has to have their own folder because some people have trifocals, bifocals, and no focals, and so they need to have where they want it. And so there's some different things about it, but it's great fun.
Oh, that would be fun. I'll encourage more people to do that.
Yeah, I had hoped there was. I think there's one in Sioux Falls.
I
haven't heard that one, but I think it's quite popular and it's growing.
I would think so because there's some really good players.
Yep.
Obviously in Sioux Falls.
And when that really is the great fun of doing that too, is when a player that plays okay, but here he's sitting next to somebody that can really play, and that is really attendance is really good because to rehearsals are a big part of the thing. Rather than you're rehearsal oriented much more than you are in a school program where you always have a crisis coming up, either a contest or you got to turn in a list for this or something coming up. With the New Horizon band, every rehearsal is what you plan for and enjoy. And if you have a concert come up, well, you do it and it's fun. So
sure, absolutely. Is that a year-round activity?
We take May off because so many people have grandmas and grandpas have graduations or marriages in early June or whatever, and then we take August and September off for same reasons because people are moving at that time around the country and things are happening with families. So
sure. So through the years, you've won many different awards. You're in the South Dakota Bandmasters Hall of Fame, and I know in 2015 you were awarded the Arts Excellence from the governor, which is that's quite an honor as well, because there aren't many band directors that have been that have won that award. You know, can you tell us about that and how that came about? That's a great honor.
That was some local people here that were kind enough to make that happen for me. Christy Lightnum was important in that. Actually, you have to make a little acceptance thank you speech. Sure. And so forth. And I said, I feel like this belongs to a lot of other people, not me. And I mentioned, like I did before, Bill Ireland and Ardeen Foss and a host of other directors that I visited with, and Dave Haugen was another one that I would talk with and find out what he played in his programs and so forth and so on. So this represents not just me, but I think I said in my program, in my program notes, that this belongs to the band directors in South Dakota who work many hours that nobody knows about, and
that is true.
People need to know that. So I guess that's my philosophy on that. That was not something I earned by myself. I earned it because a lot of other people helped me.
That's terrific. So, any other words you'd like to share, or thoughts of wisdom you can share with those of us that are younger and still in the trenches?
Well, I think being a band director was probably the best job you could have, for one thing. I really was fortunate to have good situations, and I think that's part of it. So you can, I'll tell you this, when I got to Beresford, the band was wanted to improve, but it hadn't very much. And I found parts of people lunch in the tubas, in the bells and the sousaphones and this sort of thing. So we changed some things in order to make what the people wanted to happen. I think you still have to be accountable, so that when you present something for the public, we're the only people that do their testing in public. And if it's something that people value, you'll have good success. So I think poo-pooing a pep band or sending a small group over to play probably is not in your best interest, because more people hear your pep band than ever will hear your concert band. If you want to get them to a concert, you better have the pep band supporting those athletes and the crowd. For example, I see some people complaining about that, and it is extra work, and it always comes at a time when you got other things you should be doing, and you have to do that. But still. And the marching band is the same thing. It needs to be something that people see and can be proud of as in your community, and that's probably your best recruiting tool. What little kid isn't intrigued with a marching band in a parade? If you've ever been in a parade, you watch the kids like it better than the adults. And so, from my own experience as a little kid, hearing a band play was important to me. So those things. That being said, I don't hear I don't do so much of it anymore. But when I hear bands play at contests and so forth, I don't hear as many marches as I'd like to play. And I think kids really like marches. And I think Carl King has hundreds almost of wonderful little marches to play for middle school bands. There's no reason, and you can use it as a warm-up or zip through one of those things after a couple of rehearsals and play it every time for at the end of the rehearsal to send them out with a spring in their step. The fundraiser guy for the Reader's Digest came around, and it said something by the name of Moon. He had been a coach, and he went into fundraising, and we were visiting, and he said, "I can always tell how good the music department is in a school by if I'm there when classes pass." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He says, "When you have a good music program, the kids behave nicer. They're more respectful of one another." And I said, "Are you kidding me, or you want to sell magazines? I can tell." He said, "No." He said, "That's fact." And so I've kind of watched that over the years, and I think it is true that the music department has an emphasis or an influence as no other department does on the climate of the school. And so that's something to remember.